4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, Nada. My name is Kendra Jane Patrick, and I direct an itinerant art gallery based in New York City. I'm primarily focused on exhibition making and symbology in relationship to the 21st century avant-garde. Thank you so much for joining this discussion on systems, hierarchies, and modes of protest with my fair week one artist, Joe Shane. Hey, Joe.
Hi, Kendra. To start, I'd like to thank you and Sarah Douglas at Art News for supporting historic socially conscious art. Super important. And of course, NADA for our inclusion in this exciting new model of profit sharing. I'd also like to add that if it looks like I'm reading from notes, I just need to support my most articulate self. So bear with me, please.
I'm sure it is all good. So why don't we hop right into it? Joe, why don't you talk about when you first came to New York?
I've been here since I came to attend the Whitney Independent Study Program in 1975.
Right, and then Joe, essentially you start showing pretty early, and her resume, I can attest, is a downtown New York artist's dream. There's solos and group shows at anywhere that an artist at that time would have wanted to be shown. Hal Brahm, Art Mart, Barbara Gladstone, Artist Space, Holly Solomon. And then about 12 years pass before Joe makes the work that we've selected actually for Not a Week One, a piece called President's Choice. Joe, can you talk a little bit about the formal aspects of this work?
I'd say the main formal aspect arose from a piece conceived around the same time frame that addressed the ready-made. And this was a genre I'd been exploring throughout the mid and late 80s. During a visit to a masonry supply and lumber yard on Long Island, I became enamored with a pallet of cedar shingles. Lumber was kind of in my blood because my mother's family had been involved in the lumber business since arriving as peddlers off the boat from Russia way back when.
I totally didn't know that about you. Okay.
And so there was an aha moment where the palette's formal elements read as both a ready-made Jackie Windsor and a reference to the shingles virus.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but shingles, right, are one of the major physical symptoms, right?
Yes, Kendra. Shingles were a bellwether of immunological demise in relation to HIV. And I utilized that imagery a lot in another untitled piece I did as well that incorporated modernist vacation homes and scientific charts and natural disasters, plus various skin afflictions. So this is when I really started becoming involved with the notion of utopian thought versus dystopian reality.
And then for President's Choice itself, right? Like where do you come to the formal elements of that piece?
Well, my studio was in the meatpacking district, and there was a small D'Agostino market nearby. They carried an upscale product called President's Choice, which was an array of different products. One of these products was a 4-pack of toilet paper. So the synchronicity of that reference of President's Choice to the AIDS crisis was unavoidable fodder for my second monument. So I landed on utilizing this 4-pack as a kind of brick. I had already devised a technique for applying images to various substrates, so that aspect of the technical process was already in place. My conceptual process has always been one that connected signs associatively.
I mean, it is, that piece, the formal elements are very important, right? This combination of very carefully chosen formal strategies and then materials that are easily found rather within the American commercial mainstream. For me, that's where the power and sentiment come together, right? For me, the significant elements of President's Choice are, of course, right, the barcodes that you left in the middle of the photograph transfers that are on the piece. And then those photograph transfers, right, are a lot of them are pictures of people you knew, yet you didn't take the pictures themselves, which is so picture generation, right? um, and then there's the grid, right, which I also like. Those photographs are also organized in accordance with the grid, another important minimalist principle. But in my estimation, that grid is kind of arranged by the relationship between the photographs, right, as opposed to seriality and geometric problems.
Well, a couple of responses. One I forgot to mention is that President's Choice was written in script above the barcodes. You had this reiteration of the message. And the imagery I used was on translucent paper, so there is this really beautiful floating quality of the duality of the image and this other information, which I found to be super compelling. But additionally, I wanted to say about using found imagery that this was just a given. This wasn't a thought out strategy. I mean, what was happening then was that everyone was participating in this methodology. It was just like, yeah, that's what we're doing. So I wanted to add that in. But as far as formalism goes, I've long had an affinity for the tenets of minimalism. And I actually worked for Jackie Windsor while she prepped for her MoMA mid-career retrospective in '79. And like her, I found it formally compelling, but ripe to be challenged with a different kind of content or reading. And a lot of artists were doing that at the time as well. I mean, a lot of my work was very much a part of the gestalt of the given moment, but my own methodology utilized within that referencing.
Right, right. And you work for Keystone, no?
No?
Yeah, I did. I also worked at 112 Green Street. And interestingly enough, I was there when Susan Rothenberg put up her first horse paintings. And she kind of left this planet yesterday. So it really made me think about that. There was a tiny group that included Gordon Matta Clark, Suzanne Harris, as well as Keith, Jean Heistein, and a few others. It was an amazing amalgam of community and vision and people who were really dedicated to their work. I mean, it was really, a privilege to be there, honestly, in retrospect. I mean, at the time, I felt the palpable frisson and excitement that everyone had for her. But it was crazy now, looking back at it. So.
I bet so. I mean, in just thinking about some of the artists you named, it seems, I'm wondering in political terms, right? This President's Choice takes on pretty specifically presidential indifference to marginalized populations. How, in your estimation, is the AIDS era and different from and similar to the COVID era?
Well, obviously the parallel is unavoidable, and I've really been speaking about this with a lot of people recently. Those associations for people who were around then are really in the air. I mean, additionally, the tragedy of backsliding is really horrifying. I grew up in the Boston area during an era of protest, and I was present in a world that seemed to improve on many levels through protest and, God bless you, and working with changing the social structure. So this organized vilification and decimation of progress is something I never prepared myself for. The AIDS era was different, though, in many ways, because today the media is unabashed and open in addressing presidential failure during this COVID crisis.
That's true.
That lapse was not publicly acknowledged during the AIDS crisis, except by the activists such as ACT UP and Visual AIDS, whose activities were exceptional. A guiding light for everybody, really. There was also not the same sense of urgency to find a cure or even support any of those affected. The fear, the fear is similar. There's a lot of fear still, but that fear was really isolating. People wearing hazmat suits, and I mean, we have aspects of that going on with the masks and the gloves, etc. But President Reagan did not publicly mention the word AIDS until 1988, his last year in office. During that entire decade, the gay and creative communities of this country were being ravaged and decimated by the virus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I just can't imagine that experience. I mean, so has your own practice and then the practices of some of the other artists you mentioned, does that make you feel that politicized art can be a useful tool in affecting change?
I totally believe in politicized art. I totally believe in socially conscious art. I feel that art should exist in order to address the issues that abound in any given time. They could be political, they could be sociological, but that, for me personally, is an important aspect that should be in place. There's a long history of politically engendered art. Some of it's purely straightforward in its message of protest. Some weave through a personal or some through a metaphorical lens. But I think ultimately all of these invoke a sense of unity and awareness, hopefully, which will galvanize people to work towards making a difference in a unified manner. This enacts change. Ultimately, I'm super interested in reconsidering the present through the lens of history as a kind of prognostication. I think this piece really becomes that kind of a tool in a way. One can always look at the past and say, well, look, this was a pre-reflection. But I think there's key things I've been looking at and thinking about that really connect to the present. And I made a slogan. I've been doing some word pieces recently, and one of the slogans was, "The past is rife with prognostication." So I'll leave you on that note.
And it's true. When I think about contemporary protest art, as opposed to the art of the AIDS era, right? I'm of course thinking about the fact that most people see most art online, right? And that protest art now has the pretty unique challenge of competing with, right, not just a host of popular images, but these, right, very perfect popular images and imagery in everything, right? From the literal pictures that might appear on any site to the brand, right? Like to a brand logo. So it's super interesting for me to think about, to compare. But anyway, Joe, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Actually, because we're on the brink of so much change, I'd love to hear your thoughts on creating a more self-sustaining art system and whom you consider the ideal steward of important artworks, and what is the ideal situation you could envision for artists with whom you're partnering. I'd also like to add, I for one am passionate about creating an artist resale rights platform, which is something I'd like to see happen in my lifetime.
I mean, that's an artist resale rights platform is really the dream. But I guess when I think about answering those questions, I think that, and I think COVID has really provided this, right? This opportunity to exploit both digital materials and processes, right? Even for objects that will ultimately become physical. I can totally envision, say, a future where art isn't even, right, it's not physical until somebody purchases it, right? I think that would be one way that an artist could create a practice where, right, they aren't forced to get a studio to store and make the work, right? They're not forced to figure out how to store it, which I know is serious when we're talking about exactly what we're talking about art that's 20, 30 years old. It's hard to store it. So I kind of think it's going to be um, about yeah, a real embrace of all of the ways that digital processes and materials can help us in thinking about a new way to make work. And I guess as far as my relationship with my artist, I mean, I don't know, you know me. I feel like, in general, I tend to choose, we'll call it complicated art. And, but I embrace that, and I like to build a program and a platform where people will come to me, right, when they want something special, when they want something one of a kind. Definitely not who you come to for safe paintings, but hit me up when you want a 30-year-old toilet paper shrine.
Well, thank God for those who want to travel the more challenging path.
Yeah, exactly. Joe, thank you so much for your time today. We are so appreciative. And of course, I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Kendra. It's really a pleasure always.
Okay, great. Have a good night.
You too.